Okay, and we are rolling live. Okay. All right, so good morning to those watching live, to those watching on YouTube, and to those in person, or to the one in person. We're going to continue with Reish Nun Gimel. We were just about to discuss the second opinion and the second approach of that's mentioned in terms of heating up food from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. And just a sound check, by the way, Hinda, you can hear me? It's a little bit noisy.
Yes.
Fine. Okay. So we are, in my edition, it says page 42, and right on the top of the page, and second line. Before we read the Yesh Omrim, the second opinion, which we've made reference to for probably weeks now, so I mentioned at the end of last week's year that the issue about whether food goes from a state of being cold to hot, is that considered an improvement in any kind of sort of way? So I said I wanted to do a little more reading about that. So I just share one approach with you that I see here in my Dear Shub Mishnah Berurah edition, which is that if you have, according to the Chazon Ish, if you have even though you will, if you have a situation where food was, good morning, Steve, if you have food that was warm, and you took it off the fire, the easiest example here is thinking about a cholent. You take the cholent off the crock pot, you serve whatever you want to serve, and then improperly, that's the right word, improperly you return it to the fire. There are ways that you can properly return it to the fire. Well, let's say, and we'll talk about that when we get to Sibbeis, but let's say properly I return it to the fire, and improperly I return it to the fire. So now I've done, I've violated the rabbinic decree of Chazara. So what's the story? It's fine. Even though I made a mistake, b'di'eved, it's okay, because the Chazon Ish says, you don't have to wait until it cools down, because it was already hot. It wasn't the returning to the fire didn't really improve it from a cooking perspective. Though maybe the cholent example is questionable, because again, the more you cook a cholent, although there's a tipping point with cholents, but often the more you cook a cholent, the better it is. But at the very least, from the heat perspective, that it's warm, that it continues to stay warm, that didn't really change how it was prior to that. But he says, but if you had a cold dish that you took out of the refrigerator and improperly you heated that up. Again, there are proper ways to heat it up, but let's say it was improperly heated up. Now you're actually gaining from the fact that it's warm. Forget that it didn't cook more. So there, the Chazon Ish, at least, I'm not sure that he's the only, I don't know, there might be other opinions on this one. The Chazon Ish says, it's like the dish has improved because the temperature has improved. And so he says, even if you did this by accident, or even through a nachri, so we would go by the calculations that we've talked about with regards to Chazar. When you do Chazara, through a non-Jew, it's like, the Ramah had said that it was Dino Keshachach V'Shaha. It was like I forgot, made a mistake, and did Shahiyah. And what's the penalty for that? Usually you have to wait until after Shabbos to eat it. And then if it's on purpose, so then even if I did it, but if a Jew did it, we treat it like it's on purpose. In which case, our opportunity to consume it, I think, on a personal level is gone, but maybe other people can have it afterwards. The bottom line is, what we see for this, at least the Chazon Ish thinks that the heating up of an item is considered some sort of improvement to it, at least from a halachic calculation of Chazara, not obviously from Bishul. Bishul, you can't talk about Bishul. There's no cooking there. And once something is cooked, it's cooked. There's the principle is very clearly established of Ein Bishul Achar Bishul. You cannot have cooking after it's been cooked. It's just not a possibility. Mazel tov, how you doing? Great. I can't wait. I'll be in there in just a few minutes. Okay. The Baal Simcha, the father of the baby. Yes, Michael. Yeah. So we're going to talk about it. Yes, we're going to talk about that whole thing. Probably not today. We're going to get to it, but in the weeks ahead, we're going to talk about Chazara. Yeah. Good. You're ahead. All right. So let's go to the Yesh Omrim. So there we have the second opinion. Again, we've had the first opinion of the Rif and the Rambam that has gone for quite some time. At least in Shulchan Aruch world, this is a very long opinion. Shulchan Aruch usually is very terse, but you couldn't say this you couldn't say this in any less words. That's the problem. It's such a large topic. Now the Yesh Omrim, which is representative of the opinion of Rashi and the Ri, wherever the Ri being one of the Balei Atosos, say the following: Yesh Omrim. Shekol shenizbashal kamachal ben drusai, perush shem adam shayaochel ma'achalo shelo nizbashal kol tzarko. As I've explained to you already, if you have food that was cooked to the point of machal ben drusai, okay, he was zochet to have food named after him, even though he was a criminal. I'm not sure how that happened, but he ate ben drusai. He would eat food that was not fully cooked because he was always on the run. And once he didn't want people to look at the wanted poster and then realize, wait, that's the guy on the wanted poster. So he tried to bust out of places pretty quickly. He would cook his food only partially. No, he didn't change his name. That was no name change. Ocean is bashal called sorko mitztamek. Or you have a situation where the food is fully cooked, and it's mitztamek v'yafelo. And the continuation of the cooking, yes, it's good for it, but it's cooked already. So in both of these cases, so once it's partially cooked or fully cooked and even the continuation of the cooking is a very positive thing. So muter lahashhosu al gabe kira. You can leave it on the kira from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. And here the Rama adds, afilu al gabe tanur. Or you have the extra hot, super hot oven. Remember the tanur was the ancient oven that had a wide bottom and it went, narrow at the top. No problem. All good according to this second approach. Afilu husak begefes ve'etz, even if the fuel for the fire was the gefes and the eitzim, which we had treated with much more stringency. Va'afilu eina grufo ktuma. And even if it's not, even if it's not goruf katum, even if you didn't rake the coals or cover the coals with ashes, it's completely fine. V'lo huskara grufo ktuma v'husak bekashuk bava ela keshehischil lehizbashel v'lo higia lamachal ben drusai b'chein leinyan imnot al hakader me'alea uvar alachzer v'shabbos. He says, you don't need to mention the topic. You don't need to talk about grufa and ketuma at all, raking the coals or covering them with ashes, or the topic of kashan gvava. Oh, what was the fuel of your fire? Was it the straw, right? And the peat, whatever it was. The only time you need to talk about these things is in this little window between where it's not raw, but it starts to cook, but is not yet kamachal ben drusai, which we're going to see is either a third of the way cooked or half cooked. It's a very narrow window where these laws of grufa and ketuma are relevant. It's not that relevant according to the second approach in most cases. And he says also with regards to when is grufa and ketuma and the fuel of the fire necessary to know about. That's when it comes to the inyan. If you take the pot off the fire and then you put it back on Shabbos. V'im shachach v'shaha, if let's say you forget and you leave that food on there, if you leave that food on there, and then it's cooking, and then it begins to cook, but it hasn't reached the below gila machal ben drusai, but it didn't reach the point of machal ben drusai, that tight window that I was talking about a moment ago, right? Not raw. Raw is actually good, right? But partially cooked, but not a third or a half cooked. That's when it's awesome. That's when you have. That's when it's not permissible to leave the food from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, unless, of course, you do grufa and ketuma, right? If you do those things, then it's okay. But in past machal ben drusai, And even if it's fully cooked, but the continuation of it is good or raw, you don't need to do anything. You could just leave it on the heat source. They're going to leave it on the heat source. Not a problem at all. Obviously, if you not just forget the food like that, if you do that on purpose, where it's in that tight window that we talked about, and you do that on purpose and you leave it there without doing anything like raking the coals or covering the coals with ashes, that of course is not okay. And then we talked about what's the penalty if you do that. But according to this second approach, we have much more flexibility, very practical, much more flexibility in terms of how we treat our food, Erev Shabbos into Shabbos. The Ramah says very clearly, the minhag, not that what we should ideally do. So the minhag of Ashkenazi Jews, the nahagu lahakel, to be lenient like this, the latter opinion. Okay, so there is the psak halacha that if you ask me any questions, you ask any Ashkenazi rabbi any questions, they should, I'll tell you, I would, but they should give you answers that are consistent with this second opinion, which allow for a lot more room, for a lot more wiggle room than the first opinion with regards to Shabbos. Now, I'll repeat though, the first opinion, even according to the first opinion, if you do Gerufa and Ketuma, you are okay, right? So again, I don't know how the Safara, I don't actually know what the Sfaradim do. Do they not follow? Do they follow this first opinion or the second? I don't know. Usually, if it's the Mechaber by himself, someone pointed this out in an unscientific way. That when the Mechaber mentions two opinions, unless he says which one he favors, I can't remember which Achron thought this. That was a Chazon Ish or somebody. That he always the first opinion. First opinion is the Ikar opinion, and the Yesh Omrim is he throws it out there. But I don't know. I'm not sure what the Sfaradim do. I don't know what opinion they follow with their poskim do. No, not about a hot plate. Not the warming tray. That'll be talking about for a few weeks from now. We're talking about like leaving it on an actual fire from Erev Shabbos to the Shabbos. Your oven is on. Your oven's on Friday night. This would be my lady. Oven is on Friday night. You didn't do anything to the buttons of the dials. Forget the issue of the light going on. That's a separate calculation if your oven light goes on when you open the oven. Okay, that may be a problem. But from a cooking perspective, it sounds like your oven is on, and you want to take the food all out. It entered Shabbos and it was partially cooked, fully cooked. Not a problem. You could take it out again. So assuming the light's not a problem, assuming that you're able to take all that food out at one moment. Okay, so that is what we talked about in that with regards to that. That's the halacha with regards to this. Let's go through some of the Mishnah Berurah's comments. As you see some people logging in. That bris will be on this Zoom channel shortly. We're just doing a little class right now here in Israel Scarsdale, but we will have that bris for you live. Davening, I think, starts 8, so we'll shortly thereafter the Zoom will be set up in the main shul. Okay, so for those of you who are part of the class here, we're going to go back to Lamed Zayin, and we are going to look at the comments of the Mishnah Berurah here, where it says V'yesh Omrim. Okay, V'yesh Omrim Shekol V'chulei V'chulei Svira Lahu the Kevan Shenizbashel Shiroi Lechol Ali De'adchak, since it's fitting to be eaten Ali De'adchak. It's not ideal, but okay, in dire circumstances, like you're a criminal on the run, okay, I'll eat it, right? Since it's minimally edible, therefore we don't have this fear anymore of that you're going to stoke the coals. We're not concerned because it's practically cooked already, according to the second approach, and it'll continue to cook. It won't take that much more for this to be cooked fully. And since it's minimally edible, okay, sometimes we'll eat minimally edible. The Kavan Sharoy Lachila, Lama Yachate Bechinam Yakir is going to randomly come in front of this thing and forget and start stoking the coals and raise and essentially raise the heat. Ulakach Sharia Fila Be'ena Grufu Ktuma. And therefore, even if it's not, you didn't rake the coals, you didn't cover the coals with ashes, not a problem. The only two situations where Grufa and Ketuma are relevant according to Ashkenazim, one, Shehiyah between not raw, but somewhere past raw, and a third or a half cooked. That's the only time when grufa and ketuma matters. Or chazara. Grufa and ketuma really for Ashkenazim matters much more when it comes to the topic of chazara, of returning food to the fire that was off the fire on Shabbos. That's going to be a much larger, much more important situation for the grufa and ketuma. Lamed ches kamachal ben drusai. What is machal ben drusai? As I've already said it too many times. Yesh omrim chatzi bishul, v'yesh omrim shlish bishul. Some say it's half cooked. Some say it's a third cooked. How do you know what's a half a cooked and what's a third cooked? You look at the thing; it's not cooked. Either it's not cooked or it's cooked. In my book, they look at it; it's cooked, it's not cooked. So how do you determine this? So in my edition, my Dirshu edition, they say, how do you determine what's half cooked or third cooked? According to the Chazon Ish, he says, if it takes you an hour to make your roast, half an hour is half cooked. A third cooked, if that's the opinion we follow, a third cooked, that would be a third of an hour. We're talking about 20 minutes. So that's according to the Chazon Ish how you would calculate the time, and of course it has to be the time that it cooks at the high temperature, not that you suck it in the oven and you turn the oven on, and by the time it gets to the temperature, it got a little cooked. It had a little bit of cooking that was done, even though it wasn't at the highest temperature yet that you set it to. But he says here it should be at at least at the point of Yad Soledes. Then you can start calculating the timing.
So we're not talking about rare meat, since some people will eat very rare meat.
So if people eat rare meat, then that is considered, we actually had this discussion with Smicha. That is probably considered fully, somebody likes their meat bloody red, they like that,
Right, but the rest of the people don't. So the issue is, can you slice it as a rare roast, put it back in the oven, and then it'll cook a little more.
So certainly once it gets to the point where the people who order their meat rare, is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about like steak tartare where it's raw?
No, rare. Cooked.
Rare.
Cooked.
So
rare.
once you're up to rare, Lefi Aniyas Dati, I think that's fully cooked in our day and age. If people eat it like that. And I think the continuation would be mitztamik v'yachalo.
Good.
For some people.
Okay.
If you asked shout out to my father-in-law. If you ask my father-in-law, he would say it's stomach viralo. If you go anywhere past rare, it's a waste of meat. That's what he would tell you. It's a waste of meat. It's only be eaten rare. But certainly I think it's fully cooked. I think there are scores of people who will eat it who will say though that's fully cooked. I think at that point you're in safe territory, even according probably to the first opinion. Though if you do hold that it's mistamik v'yafelo to continue it, which is questionable. I don't know how we would make that determination. Then according to the first opinion, you would still need grufa kuzuma. But the second opinion, you're for sure in safe territory because it's definitely half cooked. It would even the people who like it well done would tell you, I would eat it al yedei hadchak, right? Occasionally, whatever, I don't like it, but they would eat it if they had nothing better. Okay. So Shulchan Aruch the Kaman Siman Reish Nun Dalet fifth base Sasam Chatzi Bishul. He says we would go by a third or half. He says he paskins half cooked. If you're in a difficult, tight situation on Friday afternoon, now he's would ruin. If this little calculation between a third and a half would be the factor that ruined your Shabbos, then we could be leaning for a third cook. You'll see, by the way, that again, b'diavad after the fact, we're going to follow a third cook. Ideally, beforehand you should follow a half cook, but we'll be lenient here. It's a rabbinic issue. A third cooked is sufficient after the fact. Okay, lamed tes. We don't have any differentiation between a tanur and a kira, between the narrow oven that gets very hot and the standard oven from the times of the Talmud, which had the two slots on top, and it was just almost like a box. There's no difference. You saw we mentioned and we determined there was no differentiation. Mishum chashash chitoy asrinan betanur afilu begaruf. The only time when there's that window between raw and third cooked, that's when there's a differentiation again of kira between kira and tanur. But by a kira, there if you're in a situation where we're worried that if you're going to stoke the coals, sorry, where I lost my thought. Wait, we only say akira is a problem if it's not grufa, if it's not the coals are not raked, and because there we're worried you're going to stoke the. So if you have that fear, so in a tanur, even if it is garuf, even if there was the coals were raked to the side, it would still be a potential issue. We talked about that last time, right? That we're more strict by a tanur. By an oven. By those of you just logging in again, don't worry, you're in the right place. That bris is going to be happening soon. We'll take you live over there once they're close to even getting started. We're just finishing up a class here at the Young Israel Scarsdale on the laws of Shabbat. So welcome. But don't worry, you're in the right place. If you want, you can hang out for a few more minutes, and we'll get that set up for you. Okay. So again, where a kira is not allowed. When it's not grufa, by a tanur, it's not allowed even if it is grufa. The mishum chom hatanur, because of the excessive heat of the tanur, chashvina like eno garuf, we treat it like it's not garuf, like the coals were not raked to the side. V'cha niskar la'el avamashi tiru b'kira afilu ena grufa, but when it's in a kira and it's allowed, even if it's not raked cold, meaning like it's past a third cooked. Right, the loasi lachtos, because you're not worried you're going to stoke the coals at that point. Mishum de kvarnis bashla, because it's already cooked. Gam betanur mutter. Even by a case of the tanur, it's mutter. There's no differentiation. That's why I said there's no after you passed machal ben drusai. There's nothing to talk about which kind of oven you're using. It's all fine and well because there's no fear you're going to stoke the coals to raise the heat. Let's go to mem. Al gabe hatanur, behuadin betoch hatanur v'akira. Even it said on top, but it's the same law as inside. There's no differentiation, which is why I said you have the food heating in your oven erev Shabbos in the Shabbos, not a problem. The light, that's a separate issue. I don't want to talk about that. That's a different calculation about that one. Mem aleph, below higia v'chulei da'az chayshinan shama yechata begechalim. Because then we're worried you're going to stoke the coals in huska begefes ve'etzim v'gam einena grufa min hagachalim, because we're worried that perhaps you'll stoke the coals if it's in that tight window between raw and a third cooked. If we're worried you'll stoke the coals if you're using the fuel of the fire is the olive scraps and or wood, and also it's not grufa. If it's grufa, so then you talk about. Then you're good again. Okay, Membez ubalahachzira. You come to return this to the fire. I only come on the sif base. He's like, I can't get into this now because as a whole, Chazar is a whole topic that sif base is going to cover from A to Z. But know that grufa and ketuma is relevant very much in that scenario. Again, if you're just logging in, the bris is going to start. The davening is going to start soon. We'll get you over to the davening soon. We're just finishing up a class here at Young Israel Scarsdale. You're on the right channel though. Mem gimel. Below higia, it didn't yet get to the point of being cooked machal ben drusai. The higia, because if it is machal ben drusai, if it has arrived to that point, then of course it's fine, perfectly fine to leave the food there from erev Shabbos into Shabbos. But near the avad, after the fact. If it hasn't arrived to Machal ben Drusai, the Avayesh Lahos can make Machal ben Drusai, then Machal ben Drusai who shear shlish. That's what I was talking about before. After the fact, we'll always look at it as being, was it a third cooked? That's really the key point here. It's ideal to follow both, to chop both opinions and try to have it half cooked, but we always follow the more lenient opinion here because we don't want to try to ruin your Shabbos to the extent that we don't have to. Sharabu ha'omdim b'shita. So, anyways, many of the Rishonim hold of the third. I think it's the Rambam who holds it's a half or something like that, and so we're respectful to the Rambam's approach, but it's not the be-all and all of the opinions of the Rishonim. And he says, "Ayin be'Eli Rabbah." Look at Eli Rabbah for more of a discussion on this whole issue about a half or a third. Mem Daled, that it's prohibited to eat this food in that tight window between raw and a third cooked. Even for other people, not just for the person who cooked it, even for other people, it would not be okay until after Shabbos to eat this food. b'chtei sheyasa? Do you need that time after Shabbos that, in theory, b'chtei sheyasa, that I would have been able to cook it after Shabbos, so I have to wait that extra time after Shabbos? He says, look at what we talked about last week in Lamed Beis, and the answer was, practically probably yes, but there are some leniencies. If you take a look over there, Lamed Beis, to get the full picture. Okay, I'm going to pause here just to allow our friends at the Bris who are going to be heading over to the main shul in just a second, and when we pick up next week with Mem Zayin, with Mem Hey, right, in the Mishnah Berurah, right, we're going to be talking about a similar topic here. We're talking still about how to deal with the coals in particular. So it's not exactly shahiyah. It's going to be related issues of the food on the fire and how to sort of take it off the fire, don't move the coals, etc., etc. We will discuss all of those things next time that we meet. For those of you who are in my class, thank you for joining. I hope you